How different animals sleep. Sleep is one of those universal experiences that connects nearly every creature on this planet. Yet it manifests in such wonderfully different ways across the animal kingdom. When we think about sleep, we typically picture ourselves tucked into bed for 6 to 8 hours, eyes closed, consciousness drifting away into dreams. But the natural world has crafted sleep into something far more diverse, far more adaptive, and in many cases, far stranger than our own nighttime routines could ever be. Tonight, we're going to explore the remarkable ways that different animals approach this essential biological need. From dolphins that never fully sleep with both sides of their brain at once, to penguins that nap thousands of times each day for just a few seconds at a time. The strategies that evolution has developed are as varied as the environments these creatures inhabit. Understanding how animals sleep offers us a window into the fundamental question of why sleep exists at all, what it accomplishes, and how flexible this seemingly rigid biological requirement can actually be. Sleep, at its most basic level, is characterized by several key features that scientists use to identify it across species. There's typically a prolonged period of physical immobility, during which the organism shows reduced sensitivity to environmental stimuli. Animals usually adopt specific postures and choose particular locations for sleep. And these sleep periods tend to follow a circadian pattern, repeating roughly every 24 hours in sync with the day-night cycle. Using this broad definition, researchers have documented sleep or sleep-like states in nearly every animal they've studied. From mammals and birds down to insects, fish, and even some surprisingly simple creatures like jellyfish and sponges. The fact that sleep appears across such a vast range of species, from the most complex vertebrates to animals with relatively simple nervous systems, suggests that sleep evolved very early in animal history. This ancient origin hints at just how fundamental sleep must be to life itself. Scientists believe that the mechanisms controlling sleep are deeply embedded in our genes, with specific genes called circadian or clock genes regulating the timing of sleep across species. These genes create internal biological clocks that tick away inside cells, orchestrating when an animal feels alert and when it feels drowsy, all in rhythm with the Earth's rotation and the cycle of day and night. But while the basic need for sleep appears universal, the way different animals actually sleep varies tremendously based on their ecology, their anatomy, their position in the food web, and the specific challenges their environments present. A predator can afford to sleep more soundly and for longer periods than prey animals that must remain vigilant. An animal that lives in water faces completely different challenges than one on land. Birds that migrate across continents must solve the problem of how to rest while remaining airborne for days or weeks at a time. And social animals in large groups develop sleep patterns that differ from solitary species. These variations in sleep patterns aren't just interesting curiosities. They reveal profound truths about the nature of sleep itself, about what it accomplishes, and how much flexibility exists within this biological necessity. By examining how different species have adapted sleep to their particular circumstances, We gain insight into the fundamental purposes that sleep serves and the various ways those purposes can be fulfilled. The marine mammals, sleeping with half a brain. Let's begin our journey with one of the most remarkable adaptations in all of sleep biology. One that seems almost impossible when you first hear about it. Imagine being able to put half your brain to sleep while the other half remains fully awake and alert. This isn't science fiction. It's the daily reality for dolphins, whales, and several other marine mammals. This phenomenon is called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, often abbreviated as USWS, and it represents one of the most striking examples of how evolution can reshape even the most fundamental biological processes to meet the demands of a particular way of life. In unihemispheric sleep, one hemisphere of the brain displays the characteristic slow brain waves associated with deep sleep, while the other hemisphere shows the fast, synchronized electrical activity typical of a fully awake and alert state. The animal, in essence, is simultaneously half asleep and half awake. To understand why this remarkable adaptation evolved, we need to consider the unique challenges faced by fully aquatic mammals. Unlike fish, which extract oxygen from water through their gills and whose breathing is largely automatic, mammals evolved on land and their breathing remains under conscious control. A dolphin or whale must actively decide to take each breath.
They must swim to the surface, position their blowhole above the water, exhale forcefully, inhale fresh air, and then dive back down. This process cannot be automated the way our own breathing is when we sleep. If a dolphin were to fall into the kind of complete, unconscious sleep that humans experience, with both hemispheres of the brain fully asleep, it would stop breathing and drown. The solution that evolution crafted is elegant in its ingenuity. By sleeping with only one hemisphere at a time, dolphins and other cetaceans maintain enough consciousness to continue breathing throughout their rest period. The waking hemisphere monitors the need for air, controls the swimming movements necessary to reach the surface, and manages the breathing process itself. Meanwhile, the sleeping hemisphere gets the rest it needs, experiencing the deep, slow-wave sleep that appears essential for brain maintenance and repair. The discovery of unihemispheric sleep was itself quite a story. For years, scientists puzzled over how dolphins and whales could possibly sleep without drowning. In the 1960s, a researcher named John Lilly made several proposals, including the controversial suggestion that dolphins might be voluntary breathers who must remain constantly conscious. While some of his specific ideas didn't hold up to scrutiny, he did correctly predict that dolphins would be able to sleep with one eye open and would have some form of unihemispheric sleep. The confirmation came later through careful electrophysiological studies that measured brain activity in captive dolphins and whales. These studies revealed fascinating details about how unihemispheric sleep actually works. When a dolphin sleeps, one eye closes while the other remains open. The closed eye is on the same side as the sleeping hemisphere, while the open eye corresponds to the waking hemisphere. This makes perfect sense from a functional perspective. The waking hemisphere needs visual information to navigate, to watch for threats, and to coordinate with other members of the pod. The sleeping hemisphere, being offline, doesn't need sensory input from that side of the body. Bottlenose dolphins, which are among the most extensively studied cetaceans, provide us with detailed insights into this sleep pattern. Research conducted on more than 30 individual bottlenose dolphins has shown that each hemisphere gets approximately 4 hours of slow-wave sleep over the course of a day. This sleep doesn't happen all at once. Instead, dolphins sleep in relatively short bouts, alternating which hemisphere is asleep. The overall pattern means that at any given moment during a 24-hour period, a dolphin has half of its brain resting while the other half handles the business of staying alive. Interestingly, research has found little to no evidence of REM sleep, the stage of sleep associated with vivid dreaming in humans and most other land mammals, in dolphins and whales studied to date. There was one reported observation from the 1960s of what appeared to be a 6-minute episode of REM sleep in a pilot whale, characterized by muscle relaxation and eye movements. However, this remains the only such report in decades of cetacean sleep research. Most scientists now believe that REM sleep is either absent in dolphins and whales, or takes some modified form that has so far escaped detection. The absence of REM sleep in dolphins might be related to their unihemispheric sleep pattern, or it might reflect the aquatic challenges they face. REM sleep in land mammals involves several features that would be problematic for a swimming, breathing marine mammal. During REM, there's typically a loss of muscle tone throughout the body, elevated arousal thresholds making it harder to wake up, and impaired thermoregulation. Long episodes of REM sleep at the surface would leave a dolphin vulnerable, unable to respond quickly to threats, and unable to maintain proper body position for breathing. The breathing patterns themselves during cetacean sleep are quite interesting. All dolphins and whales display a characteristic pattern of breathing that involves periods of rapid breathing interspersed with breath holding, called apneas, that can last well over a minute. This pattern continues whether the animals are swimming or floating at the surface, and it persists during their unihemispheric sleep. In captivity, where researchers can observe them continuously, dolphins typically hold their breath for less than 4 minutes during rest. But some species can manage much longer apneas when conditions allow. Belugas resting on the bottom have been observed holding their breath for 12 minutes, while gray whale calves manage 8 minutes, and killer whales up to 9 minutes. One of the most remarkable aspects of unihemispheric sleep in dolphins concerns a very specific period of their lives. When dolphin calves are born, both they and their mothers enter an astonishing state of nearly continuous activity. Research conducted on bottlenose dolphins has shown that for the first month after birth, both mother and calf remain constantly vigilant and active, with both eyes open almost continuously. The calves and their mothers surface to breathe at intervals of less than 1 minute, a frequency that would seem to make sustained sleep impossible. Yet these animals must be getting some rest. Researchers believe that during this period, the dolphins may engage in extremely brief episodes of unihemispheric sleep, perhaps lasting only seconds, squeezed in between the frequent breathing trips to the surface. This level of sleep deprivation would be lethal to most mammals. Studies on rats have shown that interrupting their sleep at similar intervals is fatal. But somehow, dolphin mothers and their newborns manage this extreme state for weeks on end, a testament to just how adaptable sleep can be when evolutionary pressures demand it. This remarkable feat raises profound questions about the nature of sleep and its functions. If dolphins can survive and even thrive with such minimal, fragmented sleep during this crucial period, what does that tell us about the restorative functions that sleep supposedly provides? The successful breeding of these constantly vigilant mothers suggests that the benefits of sleep can, under certain circumstances, be achieved through very brief episodes, or that dolphins have evolved some compensatory mechanism we don't yet understand. The unihemispheric sleep of dolphins isn't just a biological curiosity. It also has important implications for how these animals interact with their environment and with each other. When dolphins swim together in pods, something fascinating happens. Studies of Pacific white-sided dolphins have revealed what researchers call a reversed group edge effect. In many species, animals on the edge of a group keep the outward-facing eye open to watch for predators. But dolphins do the opposite. While sleeping, they tend to keep open the eye that faces toward the center of the pod. Dolphins on the left side of the group have their right eyes open, while those on the right have their left eyes open. This pattern suggests that predation isn't the primary driver of vigilance during sleep for these dolphins. Instead, they seem to be using their open eye to maintain pod cohesion, to keep track of where their companions are, and to avoid becoming separated from the group. This makes sense given that dolphins are highly social animals for whom maintaining group membership is crucial for survival. Being separated from the pod could leave an individual vulnerable in ways that far outweigh the immediate threat of predation during sleep. Other marine mammals have also evolved unihemispheric sleep, though not all aquatic mammals use this strategy. The pinnipeds, which include seals and sea lions, present an interesting case because they inhabit both water and land. These semi-aquatic mammals show different sleep patterns depending on their location. Northern fur seals and sea lions, members of the family Odoridae, display unihemispheric sleep when they're in water, much like dolphins. But when these same animals haul out onto land, they sleep with both hemispheres of their brain simultaneously, just like terrestrial mammals do. This flexibility is remarkable. It suggests that the neural mechanisms underlying unihemispheric sleep can be switched on or off depending on the animal's immediate circumstances and needs. When a fur seal is swimming in the ocean, it faces the same breathing challenges as a dolphin and adopts the same solution of sleeping with one hemisphere at a time. But when it's safely on land, where breathing doesn't require conscious effort and vigilance may be less critical, it reverts to bilateral sleep with both hemispheres resting together. Interestingly, true seals, the members of the family Phocidae, don't use unihemispheric sleep at all, even when they're in the water. Species like elephant seals sleep with both hemispheres simultaneously whether they're on land or at sea. How do they manage to sleep underwater without drowning? The answer lies in their extraordinary diving abilities and breath-holding capacity. An elephant seal can hold its breath for over an hour, allowing it to dive deep, find a relatively safe depth, and sleep while drifting or resting on the bottom for extended periods before needing to surface. During sleep dives, these seals descend to depths where predators are less common, reducing the need for vigilance. Sperm whales offer yet another variation on the theme of sleep in marine mammals. These enormous animals, which can grow to more than 50 feet in length and weigh dozens of tons, have been observed sleeping in a truly unusual posture. Using tags attached to the whales to track their movements and behavior, researchers discovered that sperm whales sleep while drifting vertically in the water column, their massive bodies oriented straight up and down like giant, floating logs. They remain in this vertical position, apparently motionless except for a very slow, lazy pitch upward over time, for about 10 to 15 minutes at a stretch. These sleeping sperm whales are thought to be experiencing bilateral sleep, with both hemispheres of their brain resting simultaneously, which would explain the complete lack of movement and apparent total unresponsiveness during these episodes. However, the sleep bouts are quite brief. Researchers estimate that sperm whales spend only about 7% of their day sleeping, making them one of the species that seems to need the least sleep in the entire animal kingdom. They manage to function normally despite sleeping far less than almost any other mammal we know of. The adaptations that allow marine mammals to sleep while maintaining the ability to breathe, to swim, to remain vigilant for threats, and to stay with their social groups represent some of the most dramatic modifications of sleep ever documented. These animals have literally reshaped one of the most fundamental states of consciousness to meet the demands of life in the ocean. The fact that such profound changes are possible, that sleep can be divided between the two hemispheres of the brain and parceled out in fragments while maintaining its essential functions, tells us that sleep is both critically important and remarkably flexible. Birds in flight. Sleeping on the wing. If the sleep patterns of marine mammals seem extraordinary, the ways that certain birds manage to rest during flight are equally astonishing. For many migratory birds, the challenge isn't how to sleep while breathing underwater, but rather how to get any rest at all when you're spending days, weeks, or even months continuously airborne. The idea that birds might sleep while flying has fascinated humans for centuries. Sailors long ago noticed that albatrosses seemed to glide effortlessly over the ocean for days on end without ever landing, leading to myths that these birds could fly for years without rest. While modern science has disproven the most extreme versions of these tales, the reality is almost as impressive. Alpine swifts have been recorded flying continuously for more than 200 days without landing. Common swifts can remain airborne for 10 months at a stretch. Great frigate birds can stay aloft for 2 months over the open ocean. Bar-tailed godwits fly non-stop for over 8,000 miles, a journey lasting 11 days, between Alaska and Tasmania. These remarkable endurance feats naturally raised the question that scientists spent decades trying to answer. Are these birds actually sleeping while they fly, or do they somehow manage to go without sleep for these extended periods? The answer we now know is that at least some of them do sleep in flight, though not in the way you might imagine. The first direct evidence for sleep during flight came from a study of great frigate birds conducted by researchers from the Max Planck Institute and other institutions. Frigate birds were ideal subjects for this research for several reasons. Unlike some other long-distance flyers, frigate birds have been tracked extensively and are known to make very long flights over the ocean without landing. They're large enough to carry small data logging devices on their heads without being burdened. Unlike migratory songbirds, which are difficult to recapture, frigate birds return to their nests after foraging trips, making it possible to retrieve the data loggers. And perhaps most importantly, frigate birds can't swim. If they land on water, their feathers become waterlogged and they can drown. This inability to rest on the ocean surface means that any rest they get during their oceanic journeys must happen in the air. The researchers developed miniature devices that could record brain activity through electroencephalography, along with head movement and position in freely flying birds. These loggers were carefully attached to the heads of frigate birds at their nesting colony in the Galapagos Islands. The birds then departed on their typical foraging trips over the Pacific Ocean, flying for days at a time before returning to their nests, where the devices were recovered and the data analyzed. What the researchers found was groundbreaking. The frigate birds did indeed sleep while flying, showing clear patterns of slow-wave sleep in their brain activity recordings. But the amount of sleep was surprisingly small. While in flight, the birds slept for an average of only 42 minutes per day, and this sleep came in very short episodes, typically lasting just 12 seconds each, though some extended to a full minute. Most remarkably, the birds often slept with only one hemisphere of their brain at a time, employing the same unihemispheric sleep strategy that dolphins use, though for completely different reasons. When frigate birds slept unihemispherically while flying, they kept one eye open, with the open eye being on the opposite side from the sleeping hemisphere, just as in dolphins. The awake hemisphere presumably allowed them to continue navigating, to maintain their flight path, and to watch for potential mid-air collisions with other birds, though no such collisions were observed during the study. Interestingly, the birds also sometimes slept with both hemispheres simultaneously while flying, entering into bilateral slow-wave sleep even as they soared through the air. The timing and context of in-flight sleep was also revealing. Frigate birds primarily soar and glide rather than flapping continuously, using a strategy that takes advantage of rising columns of warm air called thermals. A frigate bird circles within a thermal, gaining altitude as it's carried upward by the rising air, then glides forward in a straight line, slowly losing altitude until it needs to find another thermal and climb again. The researchers found that all of the sleep they recorded occurred during the upward circling portion of the flight cycle. The birds never slept while gliding down. Catching a thermal and circling upward, though it requires complex three-dimensional maneuvering, apparently provides a more stable and predictable flight environment than straight gliding, making it safer for sleeping. Despite sleeping while aloft, frigate birds clearly don't get all the sleep they need during their flights. The 40-some minutes they manage in the air is dramatically less than they would normally sleep. Once they return to land after these long foraging trips, the researchers found that the birds spent the first few hours catching up on sleep, resting almost continuously along the shoreline before returning to their nests. This recovery sleep suggests that the in-flight sleep, while apparently sufficient to keep them functioning during the journey, doesn't fully satisfy their sleep needs. Other bird species are also thought to sleep in flight, though direct evidence comparable to the frigatebird study is still lacking for most of them. Alpine and common swifts, those aerial marathon champions that can spend months in the air, have been tracked extensively with devices that measure activity levels and body position. The data shows patterns that researchers interpret as consistent with sleep, periods of reduced wing movement and changes in flight posture that occur predominantly at night. But without direct measurement of brain activity, we can't be completely certain that these birds are truly sleeping rather than simply resting or engaging in some other behavioral state. Albatrosses, those legendary gliders of the Southern Ocean, are believed to sleep in flight based on their incredible endurance and the difficulty of finding safe places to rest on the water during their months-long journeys across the vast southern seas. These birds have perfected a flying technique called dynamic soaring, which allows them to harvest energy from the wind gradients that exist at different heights above the ocean surface. By repeatedly climbing and descending through these gradients, albatrosses can travel enormous distances with almost no flapping. A wandering albatross, which has the largest wingspan of any living bird at up to 11 feet, can circle the entire globe in just 46 days, making numerous stops along the way but also covering vast stretches without landing. The mechanics of albatross flight are particularly conducive to sleep. Their wing structure includes locking tendons that allow them to hold their wings fully extended without continuous muscular effort, reducing fatigue and energy expenditure. This adaptation means an albatross can glide for hours in the same wing position, expending minimal effort and potentially freeing up neural resources that would otherwise be devoted to actively controlling flight. During stable nighttime conditions when winds are steady, it's thought that albatrosses take brief naps while gliding, probably using unihemispheric sleep to maintain some level of awareness and control. Migratory songbirds present yet another variation on the theme of sleep during long flights. Many small birds that breed in the northern hemisphere and winter in the tropics migrate at night to avoid predators and take advantage of calmer air conditions. This creates an obvious problem. If these birds are flying all night and then need to forage for food during the day, when do they sleep? The answer appears to vary depending on the species and the specific migration strategy. Some migratory birds make their journeys in stages, stopping regularly at suitable habitats along the way to rest and refuel. Studies of garden warblers, which migrate from Europe and Siberia to sub-Saharan Africa, a journey of about 4,000 kilometers, show that these birds take regular pit stops where they catch up on sleep. Researchers studying warblers during one of these stopovers in the Mediterranean found that the birds' sleep patterns varied depending on how fatigued they were and what stage of migration they had reached. After particularly long flight segments, the warblers would sleep more and more deeply, suggesting they were recovering from accumulated sleep debt. Other songbirds, however, appear to forego most sleep during active migration and then make up for it once they reach their destination. Studies of Swainson's thrushes kept in captivity during the migratory season found that the birds took numerous 9-second power naps throughout the day and night, but these microsleeps added up to far less total sleep than the birds would normally get. The thrushes appeared to be managing with dramatically reduced sleep during the migratory period, presumably catching up once migration ended. The most intriguing possibility is that some songbirds, like the frigate birds, actually do sleep briefly while flying at night during migration. Observers have noted that night migrating songbirds emit flight calls periodically and presumably listen for the calls of other birds. This communication suggests the birds are awake at least some of the time, but researchers have speculated that they might sleep between calls, possibly using unihemispheric sleep to maintain enough awareness to listen for calls and avoid collisions while still getting some rest for part of their brain. The existence of sleep during flight, now confirmed in frigate birds and strongly suspected in various other species, has important implications for our understanding of what sleep accomplishes. The fact that birds can sleep in such brief episodes while simultaneously maintaining flight control suggests that some sleep functions can be fulfilled by very short bouts of rest. It also demonstrates that the sleeping brain isn't necessarily inactive or disconnected from the world. The frigate bird soaring on a thermal while one hemisphere sleeps is still processing sensory information, still maintaining a complex motor program, still exercising sophisticated cognitive control. Sleep and wakefulness, it turns out, aren't the binary opposites we once thought they were. The microsleepers, penguins and their second-long naps, while frigate birds take the prize for sleeping in the most challenging environment imaginable, chinstrap penguins have developed what may be the most unusual sleep pattern ever documented in any animal. These Antarctic birds, named for the thin line of black feathers that runs under their chin like a strap, have found a way to function on sleep that comes not in minutes or even dozens of seconds, but in tiny fragments averaging just 4 seconds each. Yet somehow, by accumulating thousands upon thousands of these microsleeps, they manage to get the rest they need to successfully raise their chicks in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The discovery of this extraordinary sleep pattern came about almost by accident. A behavioral ecologist named Won-Young Lee from the Korea Polar Research Institute was conducting fieldwork at a chinstrap penguin colony on King George Island, just off the Antarctic Peninsula, when he noticed something peculiar. The penguins sitting on their nests seemed to be constantly blinking and nodding off, but never for more than a few seconds at a time before they'd open their eyes again and look around. Were they actually sleeping during these brief episodes? Or was this some other behavior? To find out, Lee and his colleagues, including sleep researchers from Lyon, France, and the Max Planck Institute in Germany, decided to measure the brain activity of wild penguins to see if these brief nodding episodes truly represented sleep. This was no simple undertaking. Antarctica is one of the most challenging environments on Earth for conducting delicate scientific research. The team had to develop miniature data logging devices capable of recording electroencephalogram signals from the penguins' brains, then somehow attach these devices to wild birds at their nests, all while withstanding the cold, the wind, the noise, and the overwhelming smell of a densely packed penguin colony. The researchers successfully equipped 14 adult chinstrap penguins with these tiny EEG recorders, along with sensors that measured muscle tone, head position, and body movement. They also set up cameras to record the bird's behavior continuously. The penguins were monitored for 11 days, both while they were at the nest and during brief foraging trips to the ocean. What the data revealed was astounding. The penguins were indeed sleeping during those brief nodding episodes, and they were doing so constantly throughout the day and night. On average, the birds nodded off more than 10,000 times per day. Each individual sleep bout lasted an average of only 4 seconds, though a few stretched to as long as 34 seconds. Despite the extreme brevity of each sleep episode, the penguins still managed to accumulate more than 11 hours of total sleep over a 24-hour period. About 8.5 hours of this was bilateral slow-wave sleep, with both hemispheres of the brain sleeping simultaneously. The remaining time consisted of unihemispheric sleep, with just one hemisphere resting while the other stayed awake. To put this in perspective, imagine if you tried to get your nightly sleep by closing your eyes and sleeping for 4 seconds, then opening them and staying awake for another few seconds, then sleeping again for 4 seconds and repeating this pattern more than 10,000 times. It sounds exhausting rather than restful. Yet for chinstrap penguins during the breeding season, this extreme fragmentation of sleep appears to work just fine. The birds that researchers studied were successfully incubating their eggs and raising their chicks, which suggests that this microsleep strategy provides whatever restorative functions the penguins need. Why would penguins adopt such an unusual sleep pattern? The answer lies in the specific challenges of raising chicks in an Antarctic penguin colony. Chinstrap penguins nest in huge colonies that can number in the tens of thousands of birds, all packed relatively close together on rocky shores and hillsides. The colony is noisy, crowded, and chaotic, with constant motion and social interactions happening all around. Penguins are constantly calling to each other, squabbling with neighbors over nesting sites and territories, and moving through the colony to and from the ocean. More threateningly, the colony is also home to predators. Brown skuas, large predatory seabirds, patrol the colony looking for opportunities to snatch unguarded eggs or small chicks. A moment's inattention by a parent penguin can result in the loss of their entire reproductive investment for the season. Adult penguins also represent a threat to their neighbors' eggs and chicks. Penguins will sometimes steal pebbles from neighboring nests to add to their own, and in the chaos of the colony, eggs can be accidentally kicked or crushed, and chicks can wander into the wrong territory and be attacked. Chinstrap penguins share incubation duties with their partners, but not in the way you might expect. One parent remains at the nest continuously for an extended shift that averages about 22 hours, while the other parent goes to sea on foraging trips that also last around 22 hours. During that time at the nest, the on-duty parent must remain constantly vigilant, protecting the eggs or chicks from skuas and from neighboring penguins, maintaining the nest, and defending their small territory. A long period of deep, Uninterrupted sleep would be disastrous, leaving the nest vulnerable to predation or interference. The microsleep strategy solves this problem elegantly. By sleeping in extremely brief fragments, the penguins never lose contact with their environment for more than a few seconds at a time. They're constantly scanning for threats, constantly ready to react, yet still accumulating the sleep they need. Each 4-second nap represents a tiny deposit in the sleep bank, and by making 10,000 such deposits, they end up with a full night's worth of sleep, spread across the full 24 hours. Interestingly, the researchers found differences in sleep patterns depending on where in the colony a penguin's nest was located. Penguins nesting on the periphery of the colony, where they're more exposed to skua attacks, took slightly longer microsleeps on average compared to birds nesting in the colony's center. Meanwhile, penguins in the center, where skua attacks are less common but crowding and social interactions are more intense, had their sleep interrupted more frequently by disturbances from neighboring penguins. These subtle differences suggest that penguins are constantly balancing the need for sleep against the specific threats and challenges of their immediate surroundings. When the penguins went to sea on their foraging trips, their sleep patterns changed. While floating on the water's surface between dives, the birds did experience some slow wave sleep. But this sleep was more consolidated than what they showed on land, coming in longer bouts, and it was almost exclusively bilateral, with both hemispheres sleeping at once. The penguins slept less overall while at sea compared to when they were on land, perhaps because foraging and diving demanded more continuous attention. But once they returned to shore after a foraging trip, the birds partially recovered their lost sleep, though still in those characteristic 4-second fragments. The chinstrap penguin research represents the most extreme example of sleep fragmentation ever recorded in any animal, even more fragmented than the sleep of frigate birds or any other species studied to date. What makes this particularly remarkable is that the penguins maintain this pattern continuously for weeks on end during the breeding season. This isn't an occasional coping strategy used for a day or two during some emergency. It's the normal, sustained sleep pattern for chinstrap penguins during one of the most critical periods of their lives. The successful breeding of these micro-sleeping penguins challenges some long-held assumptions about sleep. In humans, sleep fragmentation is generally considered harmful. When our sleep is constantly interrupted, even by brief awakenings we may not remember, we experience negative consequences including cognitive impairment, mood problems, and various health issues. Microsleeps in humans, those brief involuntary nodding offs that occur when we're severely sleep deprived, are considered dangerous and are never intentional. A person experiencing microsleeps while driving is at serious risk of an accident. Yet here are chinstrap penguins voluntarily engaging in a sleep pattern that would be considered pathological if it occurred in a human, and they're doing so successfully for weeks at a time. This suggests that the rules governing sleep quality and consolidation may be quite different across species. What works for one species in one environment may not apply universally. The chinstrap penguin's brain has apparently adapted to function perfectly well on sleep that comes in extremely small pieces. Large land mammals. The species that barely sleep. If chinstrap penguins represent one extreme of the sleep spectrum, getting lots of sleep but in tiny fragments, then large land mammals like elephants and giraffes represent another extreme, getting remarkably little sleep at all no matter how you measure it. These gentle giants of the African savanna demonstrate that when it comes to sleep, size matters, though not necessarily in the way you might expect. African elephants hold the record for sleeping less than any other land mammal ever measured. In captivity, where they face no predators and have regular access to food and water, elephants may sleep for 4 to 6 hours per day. But in the wild, where researchers have tracked elephants using sophisticated monitoring devices, these magnificent animals sleep for an average of only about 2 hours per day. And that's not 2 continuous hours. Their sleep comes in relatively short bouts spread across the day and night. Even more remarkably, elephants can go for extended periods without sleeping at all. Researchers tracking wild elephants in Botswana observed that the animals sometimes went for up to 46 hours without any detectable sleep. During these sleepless periods, the elephants continued with their normal activities of feeding, drinking, and traveling. They didn't show obvious signs of impairment or distress. Then they would sleep for a period before potentially going another long stretch without rest. Why do elephants sleep so little? The answer appears to involve several factors working together. First, there's the simple matter of food. Elephants are enormous animals with high caloric requirements. An adult African elephant can weigh 6 tons or more, and that massive body needs fuel. Elephants spend up to 18 hours per day eating, consuming hundreds of pounds of vegetation to meet their energy needs. The more time they spend sleeping, the less time they have available for this essential foraging. Given that they must eat nearly constantly to maintain their body weight, sleep becomes a luxury that must be carefully rationed. Second, there's the issue of vulnerability. An elephant has few natural predators once it reaches adulthood, but elephants are social animals who must also watch out for their young. Calves are vulnerable to predation by lions and other large carnivores, particularly at night. By sleeping very little and remaining alert, adult elephants can better protect their young. The herd's safety depends on at least some adults remaining vigilant at all times. Third, elephants in the wild must often travel long distances between water sources, feeding areas, and safe sleeping sites. In environments where resources are scattered and where human activity poses increasing threats, the ability to keep moving can be crucial. Researchers have documented elephants traveling almost continuously for 2 full days without any sleep, presumably to reach safety or essential resources. When elephants do sleep, they show some interesting behaviors. You can tell when an elephant has fallen asleep because its trunk stops moving. That versatile appendage, which is in nearly constant motion when the elephant is awake, exploring and sensing the environment, becomes still during sleep. Elephants can sleep standing up, a posture that allows for quicker escape if danger threatens. But to enter REM sleep, which all mammals appear to experience to some degree, elephants must lie down. The muscle paralysis that accompanies REM sleep would cause a standing elephant to collapse, so this deeper sleep stage requires the animal to be on its side. Elephants don't lie down to sleep very often. In the wild, they may only lie down every few days, and when they do, it's typically for no more than an hour. This limited lying down means that elephants probably get very little REM sleep compared to other mammals. Most of their sleep appears to be slow-wave sleep taken while standing, light enough that they can rouse and react quickly if needed. Giraffes present a similar picture of extreme sleep minimalism. These tallest of all land animals sleep even less than elephants, averaging around 4.5 hours per day in captivity and likely considerably less in the wild. Like elephants, giraffes face the challenge of supporting enormous bodies that require almost constant feeding. A giraffe spends most of its waking hours browsing on acacia leaves and other vegetation, using its extraordinarily long neck and prehensile tongue to reach foliage that other herbivores can't access. The giraffe's extreme height, while advantageous for feeding, creates particular challenges for sleeping. When a giraffe lies down, getting back up is a slow, awkward process that involves rocking forward onto the front legs, then heaving the hindquarters up. During those moments of rising, a giraffe is particularly vulnerable to predation. Moreover, lying down reduces the giraffe's field of vision. Those eyes, positioned high above the savanna when the animal is standing, lose much of their advantage when the giraffe is on the ground. For these reasons, giraffes, like elephants, do most of their sleeping while standing. The REM sleep episodes that require lying down are therefore rare and brief for giraffes. When a giraffe does lie down for deep sleep, it typically adopts a characteristic posture. The body is folded up with legs tucked underneath, and the long neck curls around so that the head rests on the hindquarters or on the ground nearby. In this position, the giraffe looks rather like a large, spotted boulder with a neck. These deep sleep episodes rarely last more than a few minutes at a time. Studies of giraffes in the wild suggest that they, like elephants, sometimes go for extended periods without lying down at all. The standing sleep they engage in during these times may provide enough slow-wave sleep to keep them functioning, with the REM sleep debt being paid off later when conditions are safer. This ability to postpone certain types of sleep and then catch up later demonstrates a remarkable flexibility in how sleep needs can be managed. The relationship between body size and sleep duration in mammals is one of the more intriguing patterns in sleep biology. As a general rule, larger mammals tend to sleep less than smaller ones. A brown bat may sleep 19 hours per day. A typical house cat sleeps 12 to 16 hours. Humans average 7 to 9 hours. An elephant sleeps 2. This inverse correlation between size and sleep time has been noted by researchers for decades, though the reasons for it aren't entirely clear. One explanation involves metabolic rate. Smaller animals have higher metabolic rates relative to their size. They burn through energy faster, generate more waste products in their tissues, and may require more sleep to handle cellular maintenance and repair. Larger animals with slower metabolic rates may simply need less downtime for these restorative processes. Another factor is safety. Small animals, being more vulnerable to predation, can often retreat to burrows, nests, or other protected locations where they can sleep securely for extended periods. Large animals, which can't easily hide, must remain more vigilant and therefore sacrifice sleep time for safety. Food requirements also play a role, as we've seen with elephants and giraffes. An animal that must spend most of its waking hours eating simply can't afford to sleep for 12 or 15 hours. The calories won't come in fast enough to meet the animal's needs. Smaller animals with less absolute food requirements can afford to take long rest periods between intense feeding bouts. Whatever the exact mechanisms, the pattern is clear. As mammals get larger, their total sleep time tends to decrease. But this pattern has exceptions and complications. Predators, regardless of their size, tend to sleep more than herbivores of similar size. A lion, which weighs far more than a giraffe, sleeps for around 15 hours per day. This makes sense given that predators typically have more secure sleeping situations and don't need to spend as many hours obtaining food. A successful hunt can provide a lion with enough calories to last for days, during which it can rest extensively. Primates also complicate the size-to-sleep relationship. Despite being relatively large-bodied mammals, many primates sleep for fairly long periods. Humans need 7 to 9 hours, which is more than you'd predict based purely on our body weight. This may reflect the unusual cognitive demands of primate life, particularly human life, with our large, complex brains that require extensive offline processing and maintenance during sleep. Herbivores and predators. The sleep divide, the amount of time an animal sleeps, is influenced not just by its size, but also by its position in the food web. This distinction between predators and prey manifests itself in some striking differences in sleep patterns, differences that reveal how evolution has shaped sleep to match the ecological roles that different species play. Herbivores, animals that feed exclusively on plants, face a unique set of challenges that constrain their sleep. First, plant material is relatively low in nutritional density compared to meat. To obtain enough calories and nutrients, herbivores must spend many hours each day feeding. Grazers like zebras, wildebeest, and antelope spend a large portion of their waking hours with heads down, mooshing grass. Browsers like giraffes and elephants must also feed nearly constantly. This extensive feeding requirement directly cuts into available sleep time. Second, herbivores are prey species, and many of them live in environments where predators pose a constant threat. Sleeping is inherently risky. A sleeping animal is less aware of its surroundings, slower to react to danger, and in many cases adopting postures that make escape more difficult. For a prey animal, every minute spent asleep is a minute during which a lion, leopard, or pack of hyenas might be approaching. This danger puts strong evolutionary pressure on prey species to minimize sleep or to sleep in ways that maintain some degree of vigilance. The result is that many herbivores have evolved to sleep very lightly and for relatively short total durations. Horses, for instance, sleep about 3 hours per day, most of it while standing. The standing sleep is mostly slow wave sleep. To enter REM sleep, horses do need to lie down, but they typically do so for only a few minutes at a time, just long enough to get the REM sleep they require before standing back up. In domestic situations where horses feel secure, they'll lie down more frequently, but even then, their sleep remains fragmented and relatively brief. Zebras show similar patterns. These equids live on the African savannas where lions, leopards, hyenas, and other predators are abundant. Zebras must remain alert even while sleeping, and they manage this through several strategies. First, they sleep standing up most of the time, making escape easier if a predator approaches. Second, they use a buddy system. Zebras often rest in small groups, with different individuals sleeping at different times so that at least one or two animals are always alert and can sound the alarm if danger threatens. Third, their sleep is highly fragmented, coming in brief episodes that allow frequent checks of the environment. Wildebeest, those characteristic migrants of the Serengeti ecosystem, face similar pressures. During their famous migrations, when millions of wildebeest trek across the plains following the rains and fresh grass, sleep becomes even more restricted. The animals must keep moving to reach food and water, and stopping in large groups makes them more vulnerable to the predators that follow the herds. Research on wildebeest during migration has shown that they can function on remarkably little sleep, catching brief rest periods when the herd stops but remaining largely on the move. Deer represent another group of herbivores with restricted sleep patterns. White-tailed deer, common throughout much of North America, sleep for only about 4.5 hours per day on average. This sleep is highly fragmented, coming in brief episodes scattered throughout the day and night. Deer are particularly active during crepuscular periods, meaning dawn and dusk, when light levels are low but not completely dark. They feed intensively during these times and rest more during the middle of the day and the middle of the night, though even this resting involves frequent arousals to scan for danger. The vigilance that deer maintain extends even into their deeper sleep. Studies have shown that deer sleeping in areas with higher predator densities take shorter sleep bouts and wake more frequently than deer in areas with fewer predators. The brain is constantly monitoring the environment even during sleep, and the threshold for awakening is set lower when danger is more likely. This ability to calibrate sleep depth and duration based on current threat level demonstrates the sophisticated ways that sleep integrates with an animal's broader behavioral ecology. Contrast these herbivore sleep patterns with those of large predators, and the differences are striking. Lions, often called the king of beasts, spend a remarkable amount of time sleeping and resting. Estimates suggest that lions sleep or rest for between 15 and 20 hours per day. Much of this time is spent lying in the shade during the heat of the day, apparently doing very little. Lions can afford this lifestyle because of their hunting strategy and their position at the top of the food chain. A successful lion hunt can provide enough meat to sustain the pride for several days. After gorging on a kill, lions enter a period of rest and digestion. They have no predators to fear as adults, so they can sleep deeply and for extended periods. The energy-intensive activity of hunting, which involves brief periods of intense running and combat, is balanced by long periods of inactivity. This feast or famine lifestyle, common among large predators, permits and perhaps even requires extensive rest between hunts. Tigers show similar patterns, sleeping for about 15 to 18 hours per day. Like lions, tigers are apex predators with no natural enemies once they reach adulthood. They hunt relatively infrequently, perhaps once every several days, and spend the intervening time resting. The successful hunt provides enough calories to sustain them through these rest periods. Solitary hunters like tigers may actually sleep more consistently than social hunters like lions, since they don't need to coordinate their rest periods with pride members. Leopards, though stealthy and adaptable big cats, sleep for around 12 to 15 hours per day. Interestingly, leopards have developed a unique strategy for sleeping safely. They often drag their kills up into trees, both to protect the meat from scavengers like hyenas and to create a secure location for resting. A leopard draped across a thick branch high in an acacia tree, its spotted coat blending with the dappled shadows, can sleep peacefully with little risk of disturbance. This tree-sleeping behavior allows leopards to rest more deeply than they might on the ground. Domestic cats, which are predators despite their small size and close association with humans, sleep for 12 to 16 hours per day. This extensive sleep time reflects their predatory lifestyle. Cats are ambush hunters who rely on brief bursts of intense activity to catch prey. Between these hunting episodes, they conserve energy through rest and sleep. The domestic cat's wild ancestors, species like the African wildcat, show similar sleep patterns, suggesting that the house cat's love of napping is deeply rooted in feline evolution rather than being a product of domestication. Dogs, as predators and members of the carnivora order, also sleep more than herbivores of similar size. Adult domestic dogs sleep around 12 to 14 hours per day, while puppies may sleep up to 20 hours. Wild canids like wolves show similar or slightly less sleep, around 8 to 10 hours per day for adults, which is still considerably more than what large herbivores get. Wolves, like other pack-hunting predators, coordinate their activity periods for hunting and can afford to rest extensively between hunts. The predator-prey divide in sleep patterns extends beyond mammals. Predatory birds like eagles, hawks, and owls tend to sleep more than many other birds, particularly compared to small prey species. A golden eagle may sleep for 10 to 12 hours per night, spending its daytime hours hunting or perched on high vantage points watching for prey. An owl, being nocturnal, reverses this pattern but still gets extensive rest during the day when it's not actively hunting. Meanwhile, small prey birds like finches, sparrows, and other songbirds must balance their sleep against constant vigilance for predators. Many of these birds sleep in flocks, using the same safety in numbers strategy that mammals employ. Research on flocking birds has revealed that individuals on the edge of the sleeping group maintain higher levels of vigilance than birds in the center, opening their eyes more frequently and sleeping more lightly. This gradient of vigilance allows the flock as a whole to sleep while maintaining some degree of collective awareness. The sleep differences between predators and prey aren't absolute. There are predators that sleep relatively little and prey species that sleep extensively when conditions allow. But the general pattern is clear and makes evolutionary sense. An animal's sleep is constrained by its need to obtain food, its vulnerability to predation, and its social structure. Predators with more secure sleeping situations and less time required for feeding can afford more sleep. Prey species must sacrifice sleep time for vigilance and feeding. Sleep, like every other aspect of biology, is shaped by the ecological pressures each species faces. Sleeping in groups, the social side of rest for many animals, sleep is not a solitary activity. Species that live in groups, from meerkats and prairie dogs to elephants and dolphins, must coordinate their rest periods to maintain group cohesion and collective vigilance. The ways that social animals manage sleep reveal yet another dimension of flexibility and adaptation in this fundamental behavior. Meerkats, those charismatic mongooses of southern Africa, provide an excellent example of coordinated group sleeping. These small carnivores live in tight-knit family groups called mobs that typically number between 20 and 30 individuals, though some groups can be much larger. Meerkats dig extensive burrow systems with multiple entrances and chambers, and these underground warrens serve as their primary sleeping sites. Each night as darkness falls, the meerkat mob retreats into the burrow system, huddling together for warmth and security. The meerkats sleep in close physical contact, piled on top of each other in a furry mass. This sleeping arrangement serves multiple purposes. First, it provides warmth. The Kalahari Desert, where meerkats live, can get quite cold at night, and body heat sharing helps the animals maintain their temperature without expending extra calories. Second, the group sleeping arrangement provides security. With many eyes and ears, even sleeping ones, the group is more likely to detect any predator that might breach the burrow's defenses. But meerkats don't all sleep equally soundly throughout the night. Research has shown that different individuals in the group take turns being more or less vigilant. Dominant individuals tend to sleep more soundly in the safest, most protected positions in the sleeping pile, while subordinate animals sleep more lightly toward the edges. This hierarchy of sleep quality reflects the broader social structure of meerkat society, where dominance translates into better access to resources, including safer sleeping spots. During the day, when meerkats are active above ground, they continue to coordinate their behavior in ways that relate to vigilance and rest. While the group forages, different individuals periodically stand up on their hind legs in the characteristic meerkat sentinel posture, scanning the sky for hawks and eagles and the horizon for terrestrial predators. These sentinels allow other group members to forage or rest with reduced vigilance. Researchers have found that meerkats take turns serving as sentinels, and that well-fed individuals are more likely to take on this role, suggesting a degree of cooperative behavior in maintaining group security. Prairie dogs show similar patterns of coordinated sleeping and vigilance. These North American ground squirrels live in extensive burrow systems called towns that can cover many acres and house hundreds or thousands of individuals. Prairie dogs are diurnal, meaning they're active during the day and sleep at night, and they retreat into their burrows for the night where they're protected from most predators. Within the prairie dog town, different family groups called coteries maintain distinct territories and burrow systems. The members of a coterie sleep together in underground chambers, gaining the same benefits of warmth and shared vigilance that meerkats enjoy. During the day, when the prairie dogs are above ground, they maintain a constant watch for predators. The first prairie dog to spot a hawk, coyote, or other threat gives a distinctive alarm call that sends the entire group rushing for the nearest burrow entrance. These alarm call systems represent a form of collective vigilance that allows individual prairie dogs to spend less time personally watching for predators and more time feeding or resting. Studies have shown that prairie dogs in larger groups spend less time in vigilant postures and more time foraging compared to prairie dogs in smaller groups or solitary individuals. The group provides a shared security benefit, and this benefit extends to rest periods as well. Elephants, despite being such large and individually powerful animals, also show interesting patterns of coordinated group sleeping. Elephant herds are matriarchal societies led by an experienced older female. The members of the herd sleep at the same general times, though not usually in direct physical contact the way meerkats do. When the herd settles for a rest period, different individuals may adopt different postures, some standing and others lying down, but they remain in close proximity. Researchers have observed that when elephants sleep in groups, the animals tend to orient themselves so they can monitor different sectors of the surroundings. An elephant herd resting in a rough circle will have different individuals facing outward in various directions, creating an all-around vigilance even though each individual elephant might be dozing. This spatial arrangement maximizes the chance that the herd will detect any approaching threat from any direction. The coordination of sleep in elephant herds also relates to their social bonds. Elephants are famous for their strong family ties and for the care that older females provide to younger family members. When a herd includes young calves, the adults adjust their sleep patterns to provide better protection. Adults may sleep less and more lightly when calves are present, particularly during the vulnerable early months of a calf's life. This sacrificial reduction in sleep quality for the benefit of offspring represents an investment in the next generation's survival. Dolphins and whales, despite their unihemispheric sleep, also show social coordination of rest periods. Pods of dolphins have been observed resting together, with the animals swimming slowly in formation. During these rest periods, the dolphins engage in unihemispheric sleep, but the pod's geometry and movement patterns suggest coordination. The animals maintain their relative positions within the group, suggesting that even with only half their brain fully awake, they're processing social information and adjusting their behavior to stay with their companions. Mother-calf pairs in dolphins show particularly tight coordination during rest. The calf swims in the mother's slipstream, a position just behind and to the side of the mother where the hydrodynamic forces make swimming easier. This slipstreaming behavior persists during rest periods and sleep, with the calf essentially getting a free ride while the mother maintains forward motion. For the calf, which needs more sleep than the adult, this arrangement allows extended rest periods without separation from the mother. Primates show a wide range of social sleeping arrangements depending on the species. Many Old World monkeys sleep in groups in trees, selecting sleeping sites that provide protection from predators. Baboons, which are too large to safely sleep in trees in many of the environments they inhabit, often sleep on cliff faces or in rocky outcrops where approaching predators can be more easily detected and escape routes are available. Japanese macaques, living in regions that experience cold winters, have developed a famous strategy for dealing with nighttime cold. Groups of macaques huddle together in tight sleeping clusters, sharing body heat. Research has shown that the position an individual occupies in the sleeping huddle correlates with its social rank. High-ranking individuals tend to occupy central positions where heat loss is minimized, while low-ranking animals are relegated to the periphery where they must endure more cold exposure. Over the course of a cold night, subordinate animals on the outside of the huddle may lose significant body heat, waking frequently to shiver and try to warm themselves. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, build sleeping nests in trees each evening. These nests are constructed from branches and leaves, creating a platform that's more comfortable and secure than sleeping on a bare branch. Interestingly, adult chimpanzees usually build individual nests rather than sleeping in groups, though mothers sleep with their dependent offspring. The nests are typically positioned relatively close together, creating a sort of neighborhood of sleeping chimps in adjacent trees, but each adult has its own sleeping space. The nest-building behavior of chimpanzees and other great apes has attracted considerable scientific interest because it represents a form of tool use and construction that may have been important in human evolution. Some researchers have proposed that our ancestors' sleeping arrangements, possibly including nest building or the use of fire to create secure sleeping sites, may have facilitated changes in sleep patterns that were important for the evolution of human cognition. The human sleep pattern, with its extended periods of REM sleep and consolidated nighttime sleep, is unusual among primates and may be linked to how our ancestors arranged their sleeping environments. Bats, those flying mammals that spend their days sleeping and their nights hunting, also show interesting social sleeping arrangements. Many bat species roost in large colonies, sometimes numbering in the millions of individuals. These massive aggregations, found in caves, abandoned buildings, or hollow trees, create remarkable sleeping assemblages. The bats hang upside down in tight clusters, their bodies in close contact. This colonial roosting provides several benefits. First, it creates thermal advantages. Bat colonies can actually warm up their roosting site through collective metabolic heat production. In some caves, the temperature inside a bat pack chamber can be significantly warmer than the outside air, reducing the energetic cost of maintaining body temperature during the day when the bats are torpid and trying to conserve energy. Second, the colony provides a form of collective security. While bats have relatively few predators that can access their roosts, those that do, such as snakes or specialized raptors, are more likely to be noticed when thousands or millions of bats are present. The social coordination of sleep also appears in species that don't maintain year-round groups but come together specifically for sleeping. Some bird species form communal roosts during the non-breeding season, gathering by the thousands or even millions at traditional roosting sites. Crows, for instance, famously gather in massive roosts at dusk, creating spectacular aerial displays as thousands of birds converge on a particular grove of trees. These birds then spend the night roosting together before dispersing at dawn to forage individually or in small groups. The benefits of communal roosting for these birds appear to include improved thermoregulation, information transfer about food sources, and predator detection. A bird sleeping in a roost of thousands has many more eyes and ears monitoring for danger than a solitary bird would. Research has also suggested that birds might learn about productive foraging areas by following successful individuals when the roost disperses in the morning, making the roost a hub for information sharing. Reptiles and amphibians. Ancient sleepers as we move away from the warm-blooded mammals and birds and turn our attention to reptiles and amphibians. The concept of sleep becomes at once more mysterious and more ancient. These ectothermic animals, whose body temperature matches their environment rather than being internally regulated, have been on Earth far longer than mammals. Understanding how they sleep offers glimpses into what sleep might have looked like hundreds of millions of years ago, before the evolution of warm-blooded animals. The study of sleep in reptiles has lagged behind mammalian and avian sleep research, partly because the defining characteristics of sleep in mammals, particularly the distinctive brain wave patterns, aren't always as clear in reptiles. Reptiles have simpler brains than mammals, lacking the elaborate cerebral cortex that generates the characteristic slow waves and sleep spindles that researchers use to identify sleep stages in mammals. But this doesn't mean reptiles don't sleep. They clearly do. It just means we have to use different criteria to identify and characterize their sleep. Reptilian sleep is typically identified by behavioral criteria rather than electroencephalographic patterns. A sleeping reptile shows reduced motor activity, adopts specific postures, has elevated arousal thresholds, meaning it's harder to wake up, displays circadian rhythms in its rest activity cycles, and shows rapid reversibility, meaning it can wake up quickly when sufficiently disturbed. Using these criteria, researchers have documented sleep-like states in a wide variety of reptiles, including lizards, snakes, turtles, and crocodilians. One of the most studied reptiles in terms of sleep is the bearded dragon, a lizard native to Australia that has become popular as a pet in many countries. Research conducted on bearded dragons has revealed surprising parallels between their sleep and mammalian sleep. When bearded dragons sleep, they display distinct phases that resemble, in some ways, the slow-wave sleep and REM sleep seen in mammals. During the quiet sleep phase, the lizards are relatively still with their eyes closed. But periodically, They enter a phase of increased brain activity accompanied by rapid eye movements. This REM-like state in bearded dragons lasts only about a minute at a time, but it cycles throughout their sleep period in a pattern reminiscent of mammalian REM cycles. The discovery of something resembling REM sleep in bearded dragons was surprising because it raised fundamental questions about the evolution of sleep. REM sleep was thought to be a relatively recent innovation associated with the evolution of warm-blooded animals and the sophisticated cognitive abilities of mammals and birds. Finding something similar in a lizard suggests either that REM-like sleep evolved much earlier than previously thought, before the evolutionary split between reptiles and the ancestors of mammals, or that it evolved independently in different lineages, a case of convergent evolution. Some researchers have proposed that the REM-like sleep in bearded dragons and possibly other reptiles might represent an ancestral state from which mammalian and avian REM sleep later evolved. According to this idea, the common ancestor of modern reptiles, birds, and mammals might have had some form of REM-like sleep, and this ancient pattern has been preserved and elaborated in different ways in different lineages. If true, this would mean that the two-stage structure of sleep, with its alternation between quiet sleep and activated sleep, is an ancient feature of vertebrate biology rather than a recent innovation. Other lizards show interesting sleep patterns as well. Many lizard species are heliothermic, meaning they regulate their body temperature through basking in sunlight. These lizards emerge from their nighttime shelters in the morning and spend time in the sun, allowing their body temperature to rise. As they warm up, they become more active and alert. During the heat of midday, they may retreat to shade to avoid overheating. Then, as evening approaches and temperatures drop, they become sluggish again before retreating to shelter for the night. This daily temperature cycle directly influences lizard activity and sleep patterns. A lizard at a lower body temperature is less active, less alert, and harder to rouse, showing characteristics that overlap with sleep. But is this just torpor due to cold? Or is it genuine sleep? Research suggests it's both. Lizards do appear to sleep in the sense that they show circadian patterns of rest and activity independent of temperature fluctuations, and they show preferences for particular sleeping sites and postures. But temperature also modulates their sleep, with cooler lizards sleeping more deeply in the sense of being harder to wake. This interplay between temperature and sleep becomes even more pronounced in hibernating reptiles. Many reptiles living in temperate regions enter a state called brumation during the winter months. Brumation is similar to mammalian hibernation in that it involves a prolonged period of inactivity and dramatically reduced metabolic rate, but it differs in some key ways. Brumating reptiles may occasionally wake to drink water if temperatures rise, whereas hibernating mammals typically remain continuously dormant. Brumation is more dependent on environmental temperature than hibernation, with the reptile's body temperature dropping to match the surrounding environment. During brumation, the distinction between sleep and torpor becomes blurred. The animal is behaviorally inactive, has reduced responsiveness to stimuli, and shows all the outward signs of sleep. But the physiological state may be different from sleep during warmer periods. Some researchers reserve the term sleep for the rest periods that occur when the animal is maintaining a body temperature within its normal active range, and use terms like torpor or brumation for the deeper states of reduced metabolism during cold periods. Snakes present some unique challenges for studying sleep because many species lack eyelids. Most snakes have a clear scale called a spectacle covering each eye, which they can't close. This means you can't tell if a snake is sleeping simply by looking at whether its eyes are open or closed. Instead, researchers must rely on other behavioral cues. A sleeping snake typically remains motionless in a secure location, shows reduced responsiveness to stimuli, and displays consistent daily patterns of activity and rest. Different snake species have different activity patterns depending on whether they're diurnal, nocturnal, or crepuscular. Nocturnal snakes, like many pit vipers, spend the daylight hours resting in secure hiding spots, emerging at night to hunt. Diurnal snakes, like many colubrids, are active during the day and rest at night. These rest periods certainly seem to serve the same functions as sleep in other animals, even if the underlying physiology might differ in some respects from mammalian sleep. Crocodilians, those ancient reptiles that have remained largely unchanged for millions of years, also sleep, though like other reptiles, their sleep is less well characterized than mammalian sleep. Alligators and crocodiles are ambush predators that spend long periods waiting motionlessly for prey to approach. During these waiting periods, are they asleep or simply patient? It's not always easy to tell. But crocodilians do show clear daily rest activity patterns, typically being more active at night and resting during the day. Though this varies by species and environmental conditions, one remarkable feature of crocodilian behavior that relates to sleep is their unihemispheric alertness. While it's not been definitively proven that crocodilians engage in unihemispheric sleep the way dolphins do, they can certainly keep one eye open while apparently sleeping with the other side of their brain. This has been documented through careful behavioral observations showing crocodiles with one eye open and one eye closed, maintaining this asymmetric state for extended periods. Whether this represents true unihemispheric sleep with one hemisphere of the brain showing sleep-like activity while the other remains fully awake, or whether it's something different, remains an open question. Turtles, with their protective shells and diverse habitats ranging from fully terrestrial to fully aquatic, show sleep patterns that vary with their lifestyle. Terrestrial turtles and tortoises typically sleep at night, finding secure locations where they tuck their head and legs partially or fully into their shell. Aquatic turtles face challenges somewhat similar to marine mammals in that they must surface periodically to breathe. However, many freshwater turtles have evolved additional respiratory mechanisms that reduce their dependence on lung breathing. Some aquatic turtles can absorb oxygen directly through specialized tissues in their throat or cloaca, allowing them to remain submerged for extended periods. During winter brumation, when their metabolism slows dramatically, some species can remain underwater for months, meeting their minimal oxygen needs through these alternative respiratory pathways. This adaptation allows them to rest or sleep on the bottom of ponds and lakes without surfacing, though whether they're truly sleeping or in a deeper state of torpor during these long submergences is debatable. Sea turtles, those magnificent ocean wanderers, appear to sleep both at the surface and underwater. Resting sea turtles have been observed floating at the surface with their heads out of water, apparently sleeping peacefully while bobbing on the waves. Others have been found resting underwater, either on the bottom in shallow areas or wedged under coral ledges where they're protected from currents and predators. These underwater rests can last for several hours, with the turtle surfacing periodically to breathe before returning to its resting spot. The sleep patterns of sea turtles, like those of marine mammals and seabirds, must accommodate both the need for rest and the challenges of life in the ocean. The pelagic life of adult sea turtles means they spend months or even years at sea without touching land, except for females coming ashore to nest. During these long ocean voyages, the turtles must balance the need for sleep against the demands of swimming, feeding, avoiding predators, and in the case of females, navigating to nesting beaches. Amphibians, the group that includes frogs, toads, salamanders, and Sicilian, also sleep, though like reptiles, their sleep is less well studied than that of mammals. Amphibians have complex life cycles that typically involve an aquatic larval stage and a terrestrial or semi-aquatic adult stage. The different life stages may have different sleep patterns reflecting their different lifestyles and vulnerabilities. Frogs and toads display clear rest activity cycles, typically being most active at dusk and night when humidity is higher and when their prey, mostly insects, are abundant. During the day, frogs rest in cool, moist locations where they're protected from desiccation and predation. A resting frog sits motionlessly with its eyes closed, showing all the behavioral signs of sleep. If disturbed, it will leap away, demonstrating that it can rouse quickly when needed, but left undisturbed, it will remain at rest for hours. The breathing patterns of resting frogs are interesting because frogs breathe through multiple routes. They use their lungs, but they also absorb oxygen through their skin, particularly through the thin, highly vascularized skin of the throat. When a frog is resting, you can see its throat pulsing rhythmically as it ventilates its lungs, but the rate and pattern of this breathing change during rest compared to active periods, suggesting alterations in metabolic rate and perhaps also in sleep state. Some frogs enter prolonged dormancy during unfavorable periods, either hibernating during cold winters or estivating during hot, dry summers. During these dormant periods, which can last for months, the frogs bury themselves in mud or find other secure locations and become nearly completely inactive. Their metabolism slows to a tiny fraction of its normal rate, and they live off stored energy reserves. Whether this dormancy constitutes sleep in any meaningful sense is unclear. It's certainly a state of prolonged inactivity and reduced responsiveness, but the physiological processes may be quite different from sleep during active periods. The study of sleep in reptiles and amphibians reminds us that sleep, whatever its ultimate purposes, is an ancient phenomenon that predates the evolution of warm-blooded animals by hundreds of millions of years. The fact that reptiles and amphibians sleep, and that some reptiles show something resembling the two-stage sleep structure of mammals, suggests that the fundamental functions of sleep are deeply embedded in vertebrate biology. These ancient sleepers provide clues to understanding why sleep evolved in the first place and what it accomplishes at a cellular and neural level. Fish and beyond. Sleep in the water. If studying sleep in reptiles and amphibians pushes the boundaries of how we define and identify sleep, then investigating sleep in fish takes us even further into uncertain territory. Fish are even more distantly related to us than reptiles. Their brains are structured quite differently, and many aspects of their behavior are adapted to an aquatic environment that poses unique challenges. Yet research over the past few decades has made it increasingly clear that fish do sleep, or at least engage in behavioral states that serve the same fundamental purposes as sleep in other animals. The zebrafish, a small freshwater fish that has become one of the most important model organisms in biological research, has provided many insights into fish sleep. Zebrafish are convenient research subjects because they are small, breed readily, and their transparent larvae allow scientists to observe brain activity and development in remarkable detail. Despite their simplicity compared to mammals, zebrafish show clear daily rhythms of activity and rest. At night, or during their designated rest period, they become largely immobile, hover near the bottom of the tank or in sheltered areas, and show a marked increase in their arousal threshold. In other words, they become harder to wake up, one of the key behavioral criteria used to define sleep. When researchers deprive zebrafish of this rest, the fish show a rebound effect, sleeping more and more deeply afterward, just as mammals and birds do after sleep deprivation. This compensatory sleep strongly suggests that whatever state zebrafish enter during their periods of immobility is not merely passive rest, but a biologically regulated and necessary process. Even more intriguingly, many of the same genes that regulate sleep and circadian rhythms in humans and other mammals also influence sleep-like behavior in zebrafish. This deep genetic conservation points to an ancient origin of sleep, one that predates the emergence of land-dwelling vertebrates by hundreds of millions of years. Other fish show equally fascinating variations on the theme. Some species of reef fish wedge themselves into coral crevices or bury themselves in sand at night, entering a state of immobility that clearly serves the same function as sleep. Parrotfish even secrete a thin mucus cocoon around their bodies before settling in for the night, a structure that may mask their scent from predators while they are in this vulnerable state. Sharks, which must keep water flowing over their gills to breathe, cannot become completely immobile. Many species instead enter a state of reduced activity in which they swim slowly or rest in areas where currents provide passive water flow over their gills. Even in these species, researchers have observed daily cycles of activity and rest that strongly suggest the presence of sleep or a sleep-like state. Some fish take this adaptation even further. Certain species can rest on the seafloor, propped up by their fins, while others, like some tunas and sharks, appear to alternate between periods of active swimming and slower, more economical cruising that may represent a form of half-awake rest. In all of these cases, the details differ, but the pattern is the same even in an environment as alien as the underwater world, and even in animals whose brains are far simpler than our own. life has found a way to carve out time for a state that looks, acts, and behaves very much like sleep. Other fish show equally fascinating variations on the theme. Some species of reef fish wedge themselves into coral crevices or bury themselves in sand at night, entering a state of immobility that clearly serves the same function as sleep. Parrotfish even secrete a thin mucus cocoon around their bodies before settling in for the night, a structure that may mask their scent from predators while they are in this vulnerable state. Sharks, which must keep water flowing over their gills to breathe, cannot become completely immobile. Many species instead enter a state of reduced activity in which they swim slowly or rest in areas where currents provide passive water flow over their gills. Even in these species, researchers have observed daily cycles of activity and rest that strongly suggest the presence of sleep or a sleep-like state. Some fish take this adaptation even further. Certain species can rest on the seafloor, propped up by their fins, while others, like some tunas and sharks, appear to alternate between periods of active swimming and slower, more economical cruising that may represent a form of half-awake rest. In all of these cases, the details differ, but the pattern is the same even in an environment as alien as the underwater world. And even in animals whose brains are far simpler than our own, life has found a way to carve out time for a state that looks, acts, and behaves very much like sleep. All of this leads to a profound and somewhat unsettling conclusion. Sleep is not something that big, complex brains invented. Sleep is something that life itself invented very early in its history. Long before there were mammals, birds, or even reptiles, long before there were creatures that could think, plan, or remember in any way we would recognize, there was already a biological rhythm of activity and rest, of engagement with the world and withdrawal from it. This raises one of the deepest questions in all of biology: what is sleep really for? For decades, scientists have proposed many answers to this question, and it is now clear that sleep does not serve just one single function. Instead, it appears to be a multi-purpose state that supports a wide range of vital biological processes. In mammals, one of the most important discoveries of recent years is the role of sleep in cleaning the brain. During deep sleep, the spaces between brain cells expand, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow more freely and wash away metabolic waste products that accumulate during waking hours. Among these waste products are proteins associated with neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's. In this sense, sleep is literally a kind of nightly maintenance process for the brain. Sleep is also deeply involved in memory and learning. Experiments in both animals and humans have shown that newly learned information is reactivated and reorganized during sleep. Neural connections that are useful are strengthened, while those that are less important may be weakened or pruned away. This process helps stabilize memories, integrate new information with old knowledge, and improve performance on tasks learned the day before. A brain that does not sleep does not simply become tired. It becomes disorganized. At the cellular level, sleep is a time for repair and restoration. Many genes involved in DNA repair, protein synthesis, and cellular housekeeping are more active during sleep than during wakefulness. The immune system also uses sleep as a time to recalibrate and strengthen its defenses. Animals deprived of sleep become more susceptible to infections, heal more slowly from injuries, and show signs of systemic physiological stress. And yet, when we look across the animal kingdom, it becomes clear that these functions can be achieved in many different ways. Dolphins clean and maintain their brains one hemisphere at a time. Frigate birds grab their sleep in 12-second fragments while circling in warm air currents high above the ocean. Chinstrap penguins divide their rest into thousands of 4-second episodes, never fully letting go of their vigilance. Elephants and giraffes compress their sleep into the bare minimum that their massive bodies and dangerous environments will allow. Some reptiles and fish drift in and out of states that blur the line between sleep, rest, and torpor. Jellyfish with no brain at all still obey a rhythm of activity and quiescence that serves the same essential purpose. The unavoidable conclusion is that sleep is not a single, rigid thing. It is not one behavior, one brain state, or one universal pattern. It is, instead, a family of biological solutions to a set of fundamental problems: how to maintain cells and tissues, how to manage energy, how to keep nervous systems stable and flexible, and how to do all of this without getting eaten in the process. Evolution, it seems, did not ask, how should animals sleep? It asked, how can this animal survive? And in answering that question, it reshaped sleep again and again, bending it, fragmenting it, dividing it between hemispheres, squeezing it into seconds, or stretching it into hours, always preserving its essential functions while adapting its form to the demands of each way of life. Seen in this light, the diversity of sleep in the animal kingdom is not a collection of curiosities. It is a record of evolutionary problem-solving written in the language of brains, bodies, and behavior. Dolphins clean and maintain their brains one hemisphere at a time. Frigate birds grab their sleep in 12-second fragments while circling in warm air currents high above the ocean. Chinstrap penguins divide their rest into thousands of 4-second episodes, never fully letting go of their vigilance. Elephants and giraffes compress their sleep into the bare minimum that their massive bodies and dangerous environments will allow. Some reptiles and fish drift in and out of states that blur the line between sleep, rest, and torpor. Jellyfish with no brain at all still obey a rhythm of activity and quiescence that serves the same essential purpose. The unavoidable conclusion is that sleep is not a single, rigid thing. It is not one behavior, one brain state, or one universal pattern. It is, instead, a family of biological solutions to a set of fundamental problems: how to maintain cells and tissues, how to manage energy, how to keep nervous systems stable and flexible, and how to do all of this without getting eaten in the process. Evolution, it seems, did not ask, how should animals sleep? It asked, how can this animal survive? And in answering that question, it reshaped sleep again and again, bending it, fragmenting it, dividing it between hemispheres, squeezing it into seconds, or stretching it into hours, always preserving its essential functions while adapting its form to the demands of each way of life. Seen in this light, the diversity of sleep in the animal kingdom is not a collection of curiosities. It is a record of evolutionary problem-solving, written in the language of brains, bodies, and behavior. Thank you for being with us. You can subscribe when you wake up. Sleep well. See you soon.